In this video, I'm going to talk about and discuss Google's top search result when you search for STEM shortage as of today, which is June 1st, 2019. Now, STEM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's used in education and public policy. It's been very popular since around maybe 2000, 2005, early 2000s. A STEM shortage is typically a claim that there's a desperate or severe shortage or shortfall of STEM workers, which means things like scientists, technologists, engineers, mathematicians. Recently, over the last decade or two, it often is really referring to software developers, software engineers, programmers, computer scientists. A lot of different terms for the same basic job. However, it's a general category and it's tied in with multi-billion-dollar programs to inspire children, for example, to study STEM subjects, to study physics, to study biology, all kinds of things. So it's a very broad and blurry category that's very often used in discussions of employment, including software engineering, which actually is probably the largest and most profitable form of STEM employment in the United States right now and worldwide possibly. So if you use Google, and I don't sign in, so in principle it doesn't know very much about me. It doesn't have any cookies or stuff like that. This browser was launched with all the history cleared and the cookies cleared. So we're looking at the sort of raw search results that you get when it's not customized for you. Uh, and what you get is why the U.S. has a STEM shortage and how we fix it, part one. And in fact, this article is highlighted over here to the right with pictures, and it says the leading cause of the STEM talent shortage. The shortage of STEM talent is generally the result of a double-edged sword of both domestic and foreign challenges. In many cases, younger generations, especially females, are losing interest in pursuing careers in STEM before reaching their teen years. So this is kind of the standard thing you will find in an awful lot of the mainstream media and an awful lot of stuff that you will find on the internet when you do searches. So for example, this article, just to show Google's competitors, Yahoo ranks this article third, not top, in their search. Bing, which is actually part of Microsoft, remarkably enough, actually highlights an article which is critical of the STEM shortage claims. So that's one of the main points of what I'm talking about. To Microsoft's credit, these claims are largely bogus and at best highly misleading. It does, however, have this article is actually number 3 in Bing's actual listing of search results. And so keep in mind that Microsoft is a major promoter of the idea that there is a STEM shortage. So it's somewhat remarkable that they or their algorithm would actually highlight an article which basically debunks the STEM shortage claims. So in fact, it quotes a very representative, very good comment in this article. After all, if the STEM shortage were as acute as the rhetoric implies, massive layoffs of STEM staff would be akin to removing your liver to lose a bit of weight. It actually emphasizes it. When one looks at the STEM crisis objectively, however, an ongoing crisis offers significant benefit to its proponents at a fairly minimal cost. In fact, Microsoft, since 2008, has laid off at least 35,000 employees from the company, despite Bill Gates giving presentations to the U.S. Government, the Congress, claiming that there was a severe shortfall of STEM workers. Nonetheless, he has laid a lot of people off, or his company laid a lot of people off. In fact, one of the most remarkable things is that Microsoft actually announced huge layoffs at the same time that Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Sheldon Adelson actually published an op-ed complaining about the STEM shortage, literally almost the same week this happened. So there's a remarkable contradiction between what the companies actually do and these claims. It is interesting to see that this doesn't extend to Bing search results. However, Bing is not a very important search engine, even though it's Microsoft. And here we have DuckDuckGo, the secrecy, privacy-oriented search engine that I use, and it's the number 2. But most important by far is Google. So keep in mind that somewhere over 90%, based on my website results, I'd say 98, 99% of searches are done using Google. in the United States, possibly worldwide, but certainly in the United States. I get something like 98, 99% of visitors to my website from Google. So let's take a look at this article. What's remarkable about this article is it contains grossly contradictory numbers. So let's take a look at it. So up front, so this is an article in Recruiting Daily by Ben Weiner, and it was supposedly published on November 6, 2018. And what I'm going to draw attention to is the number it quotes from a purported study by National Association of Manufacturing and Deloitte, which is an accounting firm, and that the United States will have to fill 3.5 million STEM jobs by 2025. That's in 7 years, with more than 2 million of them going unfilled because of the lack of highly skilled candidates in demand. Okay, this is a very common sort of STEM shortage claim. They're often projections, like this one is, of what's going to happen in the future. And they often are multiples of a million. They used to be more like a million. These days they're usually something like 2 or 3 million jobs, many of which will supposedly go unfilled, which is sort of hard to figure out. If they're not filled, how real are they? And this is prominently displayed in this graphic box here, 3.5 million. Okay, that sounds reasonable up to a point. And then it goes into a lengthy discussion of the supposed causes, and the reason for this is supposedly that students, and they're talking about people in K through 12, they're talking about preteen and teen students, they're not talking about college students. Although the companies hire their employees are college graduates. They hire from colleges. They don't hire from high schools. They don't hire from elementary schools. Their pipeline, if you will, they love the term pipeline, is the output of colleges. But it doesn't talk about something wrong with the colleges. Like most of these claims, it talks about the lack of interest or ability on the part of K through 12 students, kindergarten through high school, seniors and high school students. And somehow, incredibly, these students are unaware of the, here, for example, a 2018 winter survey from the National Association of Colleges and Employers reports that STEM fields have the 4 highest projected average starting salaries by bachelor's degree discipline. And that it claims if more young people are aware of these projections, they may become more inclined to pursue these fields in the future. That's all very, is that plausible? So they blame it on lack of interest at the K through 12 level, and then they switch to another common aspect or element of these claims, which is the need for what they call here foreign talent, and they're complaining about Trump's rather ineffective purported efforts to stem some of this immigration. But what I want to point to is these numbers here. And so what they say is Forbes reports in 2016 that there were 568,000 STEM graduates in the U.S. compared to 2.6 million in India and 4.7 million in China. Now what they're trying to do here is make you panic that, oh, India and China are ahead of us and we've got to pour effort into STEM, all that kind of stuff. But what you have to think about here is, okay, what happens if you multiply this annual rate of 568,000 STEM graduates by 7? You get 3.9 million. So if you just extrapolate these numbers forward, and they typically grow from year to year by a few percent, I'll get to some more on that later. The point is, this figure here, the Forbes report, would tell you that the U.S. will produce 3.9 million new STEM graduates between 2018 and 26, I think it is, or 25. Let's go back up here and take a look at this. The number of STEM jobs the United States will have to fill by 2025 is 3.5 million. And if you go further down in the article, they are citing a number that there will be 3.9, essentially implies, if you project it forward, 3.9 million or even more, because usually the annual rate goes up a little bit, the more people are produced. There's enough STEM workers. So where is the shortage? This is grossly contradictory. So just to repeat, they are citing a study which claims that there will be a need for 3.5 million employees in STEM jobs, and yet in fact the United States, according to another article that they cite prominently later in this Recruiting Daily article, in a different context, they are actually saying that the annual production rate is 568,000, probably more. That was 2016. Multiply that by 7, we get over 3.9 million STEM graduates. So where is this supposed shortage of people? Okay, How do they get to that? All right, so this is very typical of these remarkably contradictory and untrue claims, and they're prominently promoted, not perhaps surprisingly, by STEM employers like Google. I don't know how this article got to be number one here. Supposedly, Google mainly relies on people linking to it. One has to wonder why people would link to this. I mean, if you go in and you read the article, it has obviously internal contradictions, gross contradictions in these numbers. It doesn't explain how it possibly, doesn't reconcile how these numbers could possibly make sense. Okay? Now let's be fair to Google and point out that if you do go down a ways, you will find some articles that are critical of the STEM shortage claims. So, new analysis finds no shortages of STEM workers in the United States. Okay? This is from an academic group at Rutgers. I do want to actually make a point here. These articles tend to be from STEM employers or their representatives, the ones which claim there's a STEM shortage. So this is a recruiter who gets people for these companies. And the recruiters, you might add, they get a fee for each new STEM employee that's hired. They actually probably have a certain interest in the companies believing that there's a shortage when perhaps there isn't one. Well, actually, I know there isn't one. We'll get to that a little bit more. Here we have a skeptical one here, or at least the title is skeptical. I haven't read this one. What shortages? The real evidence about STEM workforce, also questioning it here. And oh, by the way, this is my article, A Skeptical Look at STEM Shortage Numbers. Okay, so the point of all this is, let's be fair, Google does list on its the first page I get of searches, down actually a ways, some critical articles. Which is actually what I think it should produce, because actually these statements are really fake news. This is just not true. There isn't a shortage of STEM workers in the United States. Let me go into that in a little bit more detail. So this is my article about why these claims are really ridiculous. Okay, so this is the AP Calculus exams. So the College Board, which does the SAT and a lot of other standardized tests in the United States, gives tests in calculus, a very demanding program, and these are for high school K through 12 students, never mind college graduates. There are two tests, the AB and the BC. And the BC is comparable to a first-year course at a top university like Caltech, where I went, or MIT, or Harvard, or whatever, a real hard course. And the AB is like about, I don't know, the first half or so, or 2/3 of that first-year course. So it's quite challenging, and calculus takes a lot of work to learn. But how is the U.S. doing on this? Well, look at this. In 2016, according to the College Board, over 280,000 students took and passed. So to pass, you have to score at least a 3 on these tests. Took and passed, which is a certification of qualification, calculus. Now, calculus has the advantage, it's challenging, it's demanding, it requires hard work, it's intellectually challenging, it involves manipulation of symbols. It's a very good proxy for our solid, good STEM students, and people are really interested in it. And these numbers have been soaring for decades. They are rising at about 6% per year, way ahead of the population growth rate of the United States. And in fact, if you integrate these back to 1970, over 5 million students at the K through 12 level have passed AP Calculus. That's got to be, that's a huge number of people. And it's an understatement. It's an understatement of our qualified STEM workers, because many schools don't offer AP Calculus courses. Many people get into these things in college. So we're producing large numbers of highly qualified STEM students. And this is a good proxy for the really good students. So let me go back to the article by these guys. So how is it that you can get this weird discrepancy? Well, what the article doesn't talk about, and this is probably the excuse they would give if confronted about this. This is what I'm going to discuss is the typical excuse when employers and people who promote the STEM shortages, and it's tied in with a lot of different causes. So what is about this number? Well, STEM is a very broad term. So this number is probably either the same as the Bureau of Labor, I think it's Bureau of Labor Statistics, one of the main federal agencies, puts out a count of STEM graduates. And they include in this not just things like computer science and physics, so-called hard sciences. They also include psychology, sociology, agriculture, a number of things that are sometimes called soft sciences. And psychology degrees and sociology degrees make up a significant fraction of these. Now, let's be clear. People who get psychology degrees, sociology degrees, some of these programs and degrees are very rigorous and demanding. These are people who have passed calculus. These are people who use heavy-duty statistics, very advanced statistics in analyzing psychology data. They've worked with computers. They're fully competitive in any real skill level with a physics person or a computer science person. In fact, probably they know more math than a typical computer science person, or whatever, electrical engineers. So this is part of the issue that, okay, what do we make of these people who get these sociology degrees or computer science degrees? Now, that's why I looked at who passes AP Calculus. Because this could be a physicist, this could be an economist, this could be a business major. We're trying to use this as a proxy, which it is, for very good, smart, hardworking people, right? That's what this is supposed to be. And these degrees aren't as good at that in some cases. Let me see if I can go back around here. Here we go. Okay, back to this issue here. So what they're going to say is something else. So okay, these guys are allegedly wimpy sociologists or whatever. So that's one of the things they will say. And the other thing is, let's see if we can get down to this statement here buried in this thing about students don't see the value of STEM careers, which is clearly nonsense, right? Just look at this soaring number. There's tremendous promotion of STEM careers, STEM subjects, science, for all sorts of programs that cost billions of dollars to inspire K through 12 students to go into science fields, STEM fields. They're all over the place. And you see the predictable result. The number of people taking and passing these things is soaring at approximately 6% every year. And this actually goes back. I'm showing the data here. The blue squares are the data from the College Board website today. Earlier data is similar. The number of people taking and passing the AP Calculus exams has been rising way ahead of the U.S. population growth rate all the way back to like the 1970s. So let's go back here and take another look at this critical statement here. Employers are continuously searching for highly specialized skill sets that are often unmet by general education programs that most colleges teach their students. Let me repeat that because it's very important. Employers are continuously searching for highly specialized skill sets that are often unmet by general education programs that most colleges teach their students. Okay? Well, what does that really mean? Well, STEM employers, particularly computer employers like Microsoft or Google, are frequently claiming, and they will post ads frequently to things like Craigslist, LinkedIn, different job boards, and used to do it in classified ads in newspapers and other contexts and on their websites. And these ads are extremely picky. They typically list several, quote, skills, all of which they will ask for 3 or more years of paid professional experience in those skills, which are by definition no college graduate will ever have. Their experience is school experience. It's not paid professional experience, but that's often what they mean. What are these skills? Well, they're supposed to be hands-on experience with various software tools. So an example would be the C++ programming language or Python, another programming language. They're very picky, and they're almost always the most recent version of this tool or language, and they require 3 years of experience, and it's usually many of these. So it's not uncommon to encounter ads like this and supposed job descriptions like this that list a dozen or 2 dozen of these skills, so-called skills. And they're very nitpicky what they're looking for. So they will be C++ 17 or something. That's, I think, the latest version of C++ or something like that. So the fact that you've been programming for 20 years in C++ doesn't cut it with these ads. They're extremely picky. Do they really hire people with these picky lists of skills? That's very questionable. They're often so picky it's doubtful even the real experts, say in C++, for example, would meet these nitpicky requirements. So it's very likely that they're hiring people either who don't have some of the requirements, or in fact these posted job these job descriptions, these job ads are completely bogus, and they're actually going out there and hiring people right out of college who don't have these kind of skills that they claim they want, or people from these guest worker programs like the H-1B visa, people from India and China and other foreign countries, who again, in many cases, probably don't have anything like these skills, but they're relatively inexpensive. Um, it's hard to prove this because the companies don't provide transparency into what their real hiring policies are. And just because I'm talking specifically about Google, I have certainly been told by unnamed sources that something like 90% of Google's employees are new college graduates or sometimes fresh PhDs. They're people who've never had a significant, industry job. Although Google has for years posted these kinds of super specialized skill sets requiring 3 years of paid professional experience. So this is very typical that if you put these shortage claims under a real microscope, you find, like in this article, a gross contradiction. So let me just again repeat the message here. This article prominently claims that there are 3.5 million STEM jobs that will have to be filled by 2025, and somehow they won't be able to fill 2 million of them, right? And yet, if you go further down in the article, and it's fairly prominent in their section on foreign talent, they cite a number of 568,000 STEM graduates in 1 year in 2016. Multiply by 7, you get 3.9 million STEM graduates in the United States by 2025, more than this supposed 3.5 million. But somehow, which they don't explain in the article at all, they won't be able to fill 2 million of them. Well, if they're pressed on this, if the recruiter is who wrote the article, I'm guessing he probably would claim this. And in general, in these types of situations, if they're pressed on it, they will get to this. Employers are continuously searching for highly specialized skill sets that are often unmet by general education programs that most colleges teach their students. What this generally means in computers and also other, like electrical engineering and other areas, is having 3 or more years of paid professional industry experience in using specific tools, specific programming languages, specific methodologies that are very narrowly defined. They usually are several of these. Notice they use the term skill set, not a skill, but a whole bunch of skills bundled together. These so-called skill sets are so extensive and picky that very few people, including people who by any reasonable definition are experts in whatever they're doing, whether it's C++ or video compression or pick your area or subfield of STEM work, and you'll find that these things are so specialized they can't possibly match the people they're actually hiring. Which raises the obvious question of what is the actual criterion for hiring people, since they're posting huge numbers of ads that can't possibly be filled. And of course, this relates to these kinds of statements that there are 2 million that are. There are always millions that are unfilled because 2 million that will be unfilled. There are always millions that are unfilled because the job descriptions describe fantasy employees who couldn't possibly exist. So obviously the question is, who are they actually hiring? Because they're not really hiring these people. They don't exist. And secondly, the second point that I would make is that, sorry, I seem to have lost my train of thought here. So let's just say that they have these ridiculous skill sets that don't more correspond to who they're really hiring. And what is the real criterion? What are they really hiring? I can speculate, and that kind of goes beyond the point of this. So let me wrap up now by making a couple comments that are not so much about the STEM shortage claims and a little bit about Google in particular. So Google is the most important search engine in the United States. So by far, most of your traffic for a typical website is coming in through Google. Most people go to Google. They don't go to Bing, they don't go to Yahoo, they don't go to DuckDuckGo. They go to Google, and they typically will be most influenced by what's ranked at the top, as in here. And the top top one here, top two, are promoting the idea that there's a shortage of STEM workers. So the question becomes, how is it that this article, which has a gross internal inconsistency in the numbers, it just contradicts itself if you actually read it carefully. How is it that this ends up as #1 on Google, right? Did a lot of people read it and they thought, wow, here's this article which has these grossly contradictory, inconsistent numbers, which should raise, I'm going to link to that article. I'm going to put a link to that on my website or my blog post or whatever, because hey, it's such a great article. All you do is read it and it doesn't make sense, right? So how does something like this end up as number one, right? How is it, and Google fiddles with these ratings. It's not just this page rank idea that whoever links to it the most. There are many examples where they're clearly fiddling with these numbers, especially in the last couple of years with the supposed fake news um, problem, if you will. They have been fiddling with these to try to remove, for example, it's factually incorrect articles. Well, this is basically factually incorrect, what's being promoted here. There isn't a STEM shortage. It contains gross internal inconsistencies in the article, in the numbers it quotes. And one other thing I didn't quite get into, but let's go back here to this number. What it also means is this Forbes number, which is actually, I think, from the federal government. This is about the number of STEM graduates that are actually produced according to the government definition, which includes things like sociology and psychology and so-called soft sciences. The point is, though, this doesn't support the explanation they're offering for the STEM shortage at all. It shows that there's lots of interest by students well after the K through 12 level. They haven't been, what does it have to do with K through 12? College students are coming out in STEM fields in large numbers. And of course, this is well supported if you look at it. And when the computer industry is booming and it's hiring lots of people and the salaries are good, you see surges in computer science, for example, degrees from colleges. So the students are aware of it. It's not lack of interest on the part of students. All these programs, as we can clearly see from the College Board, all these programs that promote and STEM careers are highly effective in convincing primarily top maybe 5 or 10% of students to go into STEM careers. That's why there's all these AP calculus people, and why it's going up 6% per year. Why it's over 280,000 students taking and passing AP calculus in 2016 and still growing. Because basic premise of the article is just clearly wrong, and it's clearly wrong from the numbers being presented in the article itself. This is a huge number, and where is this lack of interest? And they also tie it in with gender issues, and often race is also pulled in, but I'm just going to let that be. The main point here is, if we look at this again, this is actually more STEM graduates over 7 years than the 3.5 million, which is highlighted in the article and highlighted by Google's search result. They don't just put it number one. They pull out this information and reformat it here to emphasize this. So someone does this search and they're quick. A student, parents, people trying to decide what their career should be, what they should get into, this is what they're going to see. And they're going to see something that is not true. That is fake news. This is actually not an accurate statement. Wrong one, Bing. This one is actually, although it is an opinion piece kind of thing, but this is actually the more accurate description of the situation. And again, these high-tech employers that promote the idea of a shortage, like Microsoft, which this is Bing, this is Microsoft, they lay people off all the time. These careers are frequently short-lived, unpredictable, chaotic. They have a lot of negatives to them, and for sure there's no real shortage, as we see here. And in fact, despite the lack of a genuine shortage, the companies are continuing to promote more students to go in within the U.S. and to import more people from overseas, which will certainly make the careers less stable and less desirable than they already are. So in conclusion, the conclusion that I would draw here is that number one is that there isn't a STEM shortage, and that's actually easy to see, and in fact it's contradicted by numbers cited in this article itself. It also, as with other things, raises some questions about Google's policies, their algorithms, and how they pick these, what goes to the top and how things are ranked. Now, I'm not sure there's any conscious, deliberate manipulation here by Google. I don't know. And again, just to their credit, they do have critical articles further down in this list. So new analysis finds no shortage of STEM workers in the United States, and further down, a skeptical look at STEM shortage numbers, which is my article, and so on. So this may just be a consequence of what they're doing, but what it demonstrates, whether this was put here because of somehow people linked to this article, honestly, whether it was manipulated through search engine optimization by, Recruiting Daily or the article or some other interested party, or however this worked, the lesson to take away from this is to be very cautious about stuff that Google is pushing at you. Especially, it doesn't necessarily reflect the factual accuracy of the articles that are coming out here. You may be getting something like this, which is actually internally inconsistent in a major way, and which is, in fact, as I demonstrate, false. It's just not true. And yet, this is what you get. Um, so, caveat emptor, buyer beware.